We definitely wanted to highlight the voices of BIPOC in ocean conservation, because when I scroll through my feed, there's not enough of that diversified voice.
It's episode 11 of Dive in the Podcast with special guest Alexandra Rose Vance. Welcome to Dive in the Podcast, your favorite podcast about all types of diving, scuba, tech, freediving, and more. We cover it all. Every week on Monday, we post new episodes filled with diving news, interesting dive topics, environmentalism, and much more. This week, we learn about Oceans Week Halifax. In our Think Blue segment, Nick tells us about World Oceans Day early on in the show, and Alexandra Rose Vance joins us for an interview where we talk about her connection to the ocean and how Oceans Week Halifax came to be. Alex even gives us a book recommendation. Before that, though, we'll hear about a treasure trove found right outside our back door. April has a dive safety tip, Amit gives us a bit of a wreck report, and we learn who we should follow next on social media. Hi, I'm your host, Justin Miller, and with us tonight, filling in for Nick Fisher, is Amit. How are you doing tonight, Amit?
Not too bad, guys. Really great to be on board with you fellas tonight and see how things will go.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you coming in at the last minute. Also, Nick Winkler, you're here tonight. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. Great to be back.
Always great. And April, last but not least tonight, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me yet again. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. You know what else is always a pleasure? Finding treasure underwater. There was an article that I read on the CBC website about some treasure that they found in Mahone Bay, although it was a bait and switch because it wasn't actually treasure. It was 3 kilometers of fishing line and several tons of sandbags that have been there for 20 to 40 years and 15 meters of water. And these guys went and found this stuff with a rover and used a barge and lifted it all out of the ocean.
Yeah, no, I was reading that. Well, first thing that kind of struck me, one of the Jamie, is that one of the guys that comes to the treasure hunt every year?
Yeah. Jamie Hiltz, Ken DeBoer, Tony Sampson, all guys that if you've been around diving in Halifax for a minute, you probably recognize all those names pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to be involved in like removing something of that size. It must have been quite the endeavor. I mean, if you go on the article and you look at the photos, that's just kind of insane.
Yeah. They apparently they knew exactly where it was at. The Canadian Hydrologic Service gave them the coordinates, and then Ken modified a rover just to do that search, and then literally they plopped it in the water, turned. They said turn left, and there was the stuff on the bottom there.
Yeah, think that's been there 20 to 40 years.
Yeah.
Right. Think about the plastic bottle that you accidentally toss on the beach when you go diving, and how long that stays in there.
Yeah, and that stuff was all in good enough condition that it could be drug out by a crane from the surface. So it's going to be there forever. What the really scary thing is, they estimated that every year 640,000 tons of fishing gear is left in the ocean just in Canada.
Yep, just in Canada.
I believe it. You go somewhere like Terrence Bay Wharf, and it's just all old fishermen's gear down there. It's crazy.
Yeah,
lobster traps too, right? Anywhere in Nova Scotia you go, you'll find lobster traps washed up. The other thing is, I went camping in Cape Breton last year on a little beach, and it's just the rubber bands from they used to band lobster claws. Just within 2 or 3 minutes, an entire handful.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's just the stuff that washes up, right? So think about everything that doesn't make it to shore is somewhere on the bottom of the ocean.
Right, and I've had friends of mine do beach cleanups in Costa Rica, where they're pulling out Tim Hortons cups, and
wow.
That's quite the difference in terms of how far that's traveling. So if you think that's turning up there, what else are we losing in the ocean? So.
Yeah, my last thing on that is we used to do some volunteer work on one of the St. Margaret's Bay Islands, and we were, as part of the rule, if you were on the island, you had to do a walk in the morning and afternoon, and literally you could walk around the island in the morning, pick up trash. Lots of times, yellow fishing line and stuff from lobster traps and whatever. And then you come back by in the afternoon and there's like, the beach is full of junk again. It's crazy. And that's in St. Martin's Bay, you don't really expect. Anyway, enough about that. Thanks to those guys for grabbing that stuff out of there. Apparently their company did not even get paid by the Canadian government despite applying for coverage for that, money for that, even though they met all the conditions. So I'm glad they helped out, and hope they can continue to help out. But on that note, it's World's Ocean Day when you listen to this, and it's not quite there yet for us recording it. We record on Thursday nights, but Nick, you've got some stuff to tell us.
Yeah, so we kind of have a theme going on today because, like you said, it's going to be World Oceans Day when this episode comes out. It takes place on June 8th every year. It was originally proposed by Canada at the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and it was officially adopted by the United Nations as an event since 2008. And it's got several aims, but one of the aims is to promote like public awareness about the oceans and participation and support of the oceans, just recognizing the importance of the oceans in general. And I think as divers, we all recognize that. But what's pretty cool, though, is that Halifax is home to a pretty awesome event called Oceans Week Halifax that is there to honor World Oceans Day and connect the communities around the oceans. In fact, Oceans Week Halifax held the most events of any location in 2019, so it was a pretty big deal for that. For an event that's only been around for a few years to actually like set its its mark on a global stage. The event runs largely virtually this year from June 5th to the 14th. So it actually starts the day before this episode comes out. And you can look them up on oceansweek.ca and find all the activities they're going to have for the week. And it's going to be online, so pretty easy for people to participate. And so the other day I was able to catch up with Alexandra Rose, one of the co-founders of the event, for an all-around chat about Oceans Week Halifax and what's on offer this year. So let's dive right into the interview.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Rose Vance, and I'm an ocean enthusiast. I'm a marine biologist by training with a master's in marine management, and I've been working for the environmental, not-for-profit sort of stream for the last 5-6 years now. And within that, I've co-founded and directed Oceans Week HFX, and have recently been appointed as an expedition coordinator and marine scientist.
That's pretty exciting. So the oceans are your passion. That, like, I know that about you, and our listeners will know a bit more about that as we go through the interview. But why the oceans?
The oceans for so many reasons, but I think my favorite reason is because the ocean connects us all. The ocean is sort of our greatest ancestor and carries the most memory. And by, I think, understanding the ocean better, we can understand ourselves a lot better too.
And how did you come to that passion?
I was lucky enough to grow up on the ocean. I actually grew up on two pretty different and very wild pieces of the North Atlantic Ocean. One was on the Bay of Fundy, and the other side was the Northumberland Strait. And so my entire existence so far, because I'm still here in the Maritimes, has always been around and playing in and being curious by and studying ultimately the ocean and everything. But it's definitely through those early childhood experiences of just running down to the beach and spending like 12 hours a day in the water that really kept me close.
Do you do any diving?
You know what? I'm almost embarrassed to say this on a diving podcast, but I have never dove.
I cannot put you on the spot there. I had a feeling.
No, I'm. You know what? I'm confident enough with who I am that it's okay. I spend heaps of time in the water. I just don't put on like a couple air tanks and a respirator and everything. I snorkel, and I do a very tiny amount of very amateur free diving within my means and totally safe, I promise.
But you're a big surfer.
I'm a pretty avid surfer. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
And as of very recent, the reason why I just moved from one surf spot to another is because the waves around here change so much from winter to summer. So I just went from a winter surf zone to now my summer surf zone. So yeah, I chase the waves. My whole existence revolves a lot around that now.
One of my big things about people that enjoy the ocean, it's like I don't care if you free dive or you scuba dive or you're a surfer, right? I think that everybody has a very different way of exploring the ocean and sort of connecting to it. So I think that's pretty sweet. Most ocean advocates or divers or marine biologists would often quote Jacques Cousteau as their influence, and maybe that's more of a generational thing that's shifted. Do you have any ocean heroes you look up to?
I do, and actually, it's not Jacques Cousteau, but his granddaughter Alexandra Cousteau, who's become a really big ocean heroine for me. Sylvia Earle, of course. But what's funny is growing up, and I guess those are some of the more renowned names. I guess there's lots in our generation, and even like some of my near and dear pals that I actually am lucky enough to get to see once in a while, maybe not as much these days, but who are very much my inspiration. I get our community, our ocean community around Halifax is just so beautiful and talented and inspiring that it doesn't take a lot to look around and find those kind of little beacons of light everywhere. Actually, there's so much beauty in this community.
And so, talking about that community, you're the co-founder of Oceans Week Halifax. Is it Oceans Week Halifax or HFX?
They're interchangeable.
Okay.
Oceans Week Halifax is definitely a love of mine, a passion project. I'm the co-founder and the director, and it has been existing for 5 years now. This will be our 5th year.
Congrats.
Thank you.
So can you tell us a little bit about what it is and maybe also tell us a little bit about your co-founder?
Yes. Yeah, I would love to. Monica Fung, she's fantastic. She's done the Ocean Tech program at NSCC in Halifax. So she does have both a marine biology and tech background. So you guys, I'm sure, have talked tech more than once. And she's fantastic. She's really savvy with social media and visual storytelling and being a bit of a photojournalist. She's so talented on so many fronts that complements me well because I'm not all that tech savvy myself. So as it took like a half an hour to get onto this podcast with you. Sorry about that.
It's all right. We're here.
We made it. And Oceans Week, the thing that Mo and I are both so passionate about is a means of actually sort of bringing that ocean connection that I mentioned earlier to life. So we saw a need within our community to bring together all of the fantastic humans and organizers and businesses and everything from government to industry to just sort of grassroots organizers all seemingly did something for World Oceans Day, which is every year on June 8th. But the schedules and the posting and sort of the announcement for it was all really disparate. And so I started with an organization and was tasked with coming up with our own Oceans Week Day event. And I had no idea what to do. So I started, calling around other organizations and see what they did. And before I knew it, I had a miniature calendar. And so after a couple years and Mo and I realizing that, this was getting pretty big and we wanted to continue moving it in that direction, that positive forward momentum that we found within the community. We wanted to keep that alive. So we brought that to life through Oceans Week HFX, kind of created like a miniature society off the side of our desks. And today we still have that spirit alive of making not making, but helping host and in some case coming up with our own, but really trying to let the community do it for themselves so that everything is reflective of our own community. But a series, basically a mini festival of ocean events and learning opportunities and networking and playing and learning on the water. It's all about getting to know the ocean through various facets and exploring it for yourself, and then through that connection with each other and the ocean and yourself, having a bigger appreciation and hopefully sense of stewardship and advocacy to help protect our ocean. So that is how we still operate even in this day and age. It's transformed quite a bit, and we're so lucky that it's gotten to be as popular here in Halifax as it is. But it definitely has come from humble beginnings with just the two of us and like 8 events.
but I know you had humble beginnings, like like a lot of projects do, and I think that you guys did an amazing job. But you had a pretty big milestone last year, right? Was it the biggest event in the world, or I forget what metric it was?
Yeah. It's still kind of confusing to me too, to be honest. We were, I guess, the World Oceans Day folks who operate sort of the international, like the website and all the events listing, told us they thought we were, the organizers, the community with the most amount of events anywhere in the world. And we were like, really? Can you double check that for us? Because that would be really cool. And sure enough, they literally emailed us back 20 minutes later, and we're like, yep, you actually do host the most amount of Oceans Week events anywhere else in the world. So congrats, Halifax.
Congrats to you, yeah.
Well, all of us. It was definitely a team effort, but we managed to pull off 44 events in 10 days.
Wow. That's quite the evolution.
It really is. But again, it's the community who pulls the weight. I mean, we're happy to help kind of direct and shape the website. We get to kind of do the more creative side of things, really. To bring it together, but it's all those individual organizers and volunteers and the sponsors who obviously they do all the hard work.
Sure.
It's great.
So I imagine, like with everyone else, right, this pandemic's been challenging for planning. I just, maybe for the listeners, and partly because this podcast is going out pretty early on in the week, what can people expect? And one of the things I noticed, you have a keynote titled "We Are All Ocean People," what that means and why we should care. Can you tell us a little bit more about what people can expect, and maybe a little bit more about the keynote?
Yeah, that's great. And so this year we're going fully online because of the pandemic. And we're definitely having a new set of challenges before us. But the community's really showed up with a huge number of events I wasn't totally expecting, and we're over a dozen now, which is saying a lot. And I think a lot of people are zoomed out, but here we are with organizing more online interactions. But the keynote is actually something that Oceans Week really wanted to dream up and deliver, something that was contemporary and very mindful of sort of our present day. So the co-founder, Monica, Mo, she did a fantastic job reaching out to future ancestors, which is a BIPOC, a Black and Indigenous person of color, founded organization to bring more awareness of issues facing non-white people in the field of both conservation and just social and climate justice, really that intersection, and also coming from a female voice as well. It's really going to be quite a fantastic. It's sort of set up like a panel / interview, right, with an Ocean Bridge alum as sort of like our guest or special guest, but it's a beautiful collaboration between Oceans Week and Future Ancestors. We're going to have Brave Space there doing sort of a visual storytelling and note taking from that as well. And I think we're going to explore a lot of sides in this conversation of marine conservation that isn't quite mainstream, and quite frankly, it should be. Like, we don't often talk about race when talking about saving the ocean. We don't talk about privilege and these social issues that are absolutely inundating our social media waves right now, right?
Yeah, it's I mean, unfortunately, the timing couldn't be in a more unfortunate way. Yeah.
It's wild how it turned out this way, because we've been working on bringing this to life for a little while now, but to have it be this Saturday is going to be absolutely fantastic. So I know we're recording this in advance, so maybe we can do a little plug for it. So it's super contemporary, it's super powerful and meaningful, and I think as part of the narrative that we all need to change, and for those of us who are white, certainly a period to educate ourselves and listen. So I think this event is going to be really helpful for those of us in the ocean community who want to learn and take the time to learn. So I'm really excited.
I congratulate you on taking up that torch, because I think that's also not just in conservation. I think it's also in diving. If you look at what the demographic of most divers are, and I don't have any numbers in front of me, but just from experience. And also the accessibility of especially something like scuba diving, which can be more expensive and more challenging to get into from a price point. So I think, even somebody that's not necessarily conservation minded, but as a diver that may want to listen to that, or has listened to it if they're listening to this in the future. I think those are ideas that translate, I think, across a vast array of ocean enthusiasts, right? Whether you're a kayaker or an outdoors person. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, well, I'm stoked. I hope you register in advance, because there's something cool happening with a grant fund as well. If you register, some money goes towards the grant fund, which raises money for Future Ancestors. So that's great.
Okay, I'm going to have to register.
Yeah, sorry, that might just be an outtake. Sorry, but for you to know while we're in conversation. But yeah, no, and I was just going to add too, like, as far what you were just saying about this being super applicable to ocean enthusiasts in general. I mean, I see that across so many different of my own ocean hobbies. Like, it's so predominantly is that space taken by privileged, able-bodied, affluent white folk, and a lot of what we do does have so many barriers to what you were saying, right? Even financially. Yep. Let alone race and maybe religious background and everything else. But I think taking a moment to take the microphone away from so many of our idols and the people we look up to and inspire us, and really just be mindful of like who those people are and what their experiences are. And then are you able to maybe do research if you can't think of any off the top of your head, but people that you might not have otherwise looked to for inspiration, and challenging yourself to do that. I think this is such a beautiful time in our society where it's like, oh, maybe my perspective isn't diversified enough, and how am I going to respond to that? And so when we were thinking of doing an event, we wanted it again to be really meaningful and contemporary, not realizing it was going to be this contemporary perhaps and important conversation. But we definitely wanted to highlight the voices of BIPOC in ocean conservation. Because when I scroll through my feed, there's not enough of that diversified voice.
Yeah, I can relate to that totally.
So this is, I mean, it's just as important and timely as it is actually very, what's the word I'm looking for?
I mean, it plays
expanding.
Yeah, it plays into building an inclusive community, right? Whether that's an ocean community of scientists or divers or conservationists or just the general community, right?
Totally. No, you're right. It's good for everybody, I think. So I hope people who aren't just into oceans actually tune in.
Yeah, no, I think it's yeah. Congratulations on taking that up. Are there any other events this week that you're particularly excited about?
I mean, I'm excited about all the events, but one in particular is being co-hosted. Actually, it's being entirely hosted with a special guest by our youth ambassador from last year. And she was so excited to participate again this year and actually host her own event after having been a part of Oceans Week last year. She really took the reins on doing something herself this year. So I'm really excited to see the video. She's doing a film screening. It's like a plastic oceans but for youth.
Yes.
And then she's doing a craft afterwards while talking about like some tips that she came up with about not bringing plastic to the beach with like for your snacks, and just like some tips for being plastic free in general. And she's fantastic. So I'm really excited to see what her event unpackages and blossoms to be. It's going to be really exciting.
Really exciting. Is that going to be like during the week or after the week?
It's so it's still within Oceans Week. So we're doing Oceans Week June 5th to 14th this year, and I think it's on the other next weekend. Excuse me. Yeah.
Not everyone's an ocean expert or scientist or policy wonk or an very active advocate for want of a better term. So this show is geared towards scuba divers, tech divers, free divers. How do you think they can help the oceans?
Well, I think everyone can help the oceans, quite frankly. I don't mean to sound cliche, but there's literally there's no short list of things you can do. I mean, everything from your, consciously and purchasing your groceries to even just like your decision to travel or maybe not this year. But, everything from, being at least attempting to reduce your plastics. I know that's a privilege in and of itself, but it does go a long way if you have that kind of accessibility. But, even being curious about the ocean, being thoughtful about it, finding your place in the ocean in the sense that knowing that everything you create and you eat and you put energy into ends up washing back to the ocean by virtue of our watersheds and our hydrological cycle. It's beyond just thinking and doing good for the ocean. It's, actually putting it into practice with every small gesture you can do. So whether that's eating local seafood or, trying to just support local in general, being kind to your body is actually a good thing for the ocean. I very much believe that, meditating and practicing sort of mindfulness in general all relates back to, creating a better existence where we're more resilient to a system that is not helping the ocean at all. So I think, I hate to use a green term, but going green and reducing your footprint, whether that's like the home you buy or the next shirt you buy. if you can think of a way to consume, you can consume in a way that's mindful and beneficial to the ocean. I think that's what it comes down to.
I like the kind of the general point that what I'm taking away from that is that there's a much deeper way to connect to the ocean than just going in the water and helping out by doing things in your everyday life, even if you're not an ocean expert or a scientist that works in the issue full time. So I like the way. I don't know. That's kind of what I took away from it.
No, that's exactly a much more succinct way than what I just tried to describe. So thank you. Yeah, and maybe if you want a shorter answer, maybe I'll just try to answer that again, but much less. But I think being in the water is so important for people to realize that connection. Right, is to have that firsthand immersive experience and seeing the beauty of the ocean firsthand, and that's what it's what the diver. That's why you divers dive, right? You wholly complex version of the ocean, just beyond, regular swimming depths. And I think that beauty of the ocean is what needs to be celebrated, regardless if you're in or out of the water. And it is those everyday practices you can do from purchasing mindfully, consuming, or reducing, reuse, recycle, refuse, right? And then also relearn, learn how to go and do your own gardening, and maybe hang your laundry as to using the dryer, and buying local seafood for sure, and reducing your plastic if you have that kind of accessibility. But that wonder and curiosity that that divers and scubas and even people who free dive for that matter get to experience when they're doing the thing they love so much, I think that just needs to be celebrated and be mindful all of the time.
And take part in Oceans Week Halifax as well.
The 10 days of the year that it's here, please. Yeah, please go check it out. Because and that's what it is. I mean, there's everyone from who sails to our scientists to maybe just have an ocean-based business, or something that's close to the ocean, or maybe just a local designer or company that just wants to support small-scale local. So we're not putting any undue pressures on the globalization of the planet. But I mean, everybody has a role to play, and everybody has their own thing that the ocean means so much to them. And Oceans Week is just kind of like a beautiful little cluster of time and space where we all get to celebrate that love for the ocean in a way that's totally unique from the next person. And that's, I think, the coolest thing for me is seeing the diversity of our events, and the different cultures and backgrounds and ages that turn up to them. It's so fascinating to see how many people love the ocean, and try to imagine for all the different reasons why.
I'm looking forward to that, and I'm also looking forward to maybe next year when we can all get back together in person, right? And share that commonly. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully it's before Oceans Week 2021. Right. Hopefully we can get together before then. But that's a big thing for this year is losing sort of that human connection. Because that's how, it's so important for us to interact as humans with other humans. And especially for Oceans Week, because again, that's how we sort of connect and share our own love and do all these different activities or learning opportunities that allow us to explore and celebrate the ocean in a new way. And not being able to get together in person this year does lose a little bit of its luster. But I still think the resilience of people showing up and doing it online speaks volumes about that passion that people have. So I'm really excited about that too.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that brings me to a question I had is, whenever I talk to you, there's a lot of optimism that I get from you. And often, we hear ocean stories, or it's often about conservation. It's all, very sad and doomy and gloomy and that sort of thing. Are you optimistic about the ocean's future? And briefly, why?
No, it's a great question. And, I ask myself this a lot, actually. And the answer is yes, I am optimistic about the ocean and its future, because I have to be. Not because it's my job or somebody told me to, but because it's that spark of hope that keeps me going, to be honest. And knowing that if I can continue to hopefully inspire others and give people some insight or new tricks or new perspective about why the ocean matters and what they can do, then we're actually getting closer to that goal. Of saving the ocean, right? Every single person that we can reach and have them participate and be better stewards and turn around and advocate for the ocean too, whether it be by storytelling or again, that firsthand experience, slowly but surely, I think more people are, and thankfully, thanks to social media and beautiful underwater photography and housing and skills like you have, to bring that beauty to so many people and people be inspired by it, regardless if they're coastal or in the middle, inland somewhere. I think the more awareness there is, and there's more work being done to preserve what we love, I mean, I think we stand a good chance, quite frankly. So as long as we keep it up, there's more podcasts, there's more, photography gigs in your near future, the better off we'll be. And so, yeah, I get inspired, and maybe you're hearing a little extra optimism because I'm so grateful to be part of something like this, which is actually, the outreach that's so important. But
I'll confess
I'm
that
stoked.
your optimism and just the work that you've done inspires me. So it's always a pleasure to see what you're up to and to talk to you. So keep it up.
Likewise. I still, I remember our more recent coffee chat, and like the pleasure of getting to like hang out with you and hear like all the things that were driving you, and sort of like that really like the bashful innocence of starting like a whole new business. You were so wide-eyed and bushy-tailed and so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, like this is fantastic. Like we've got another one. we've got somebody who's like going to stay in the ocean court forever. And I was like, so stoked. But yeah, you inspire me too, pal. It's great to see how far you've come so quickly. It's awesome.
We'll see what the rest of the year brings. So I usually do a little book recommendation. So did you have a book, an ocean book that might fit in with the theme of, either Oceans Week or the oceans in general? Is there a book that really tugs at your heartstrings that you might want to recommend to people?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I've read it a few times, and it's not super timely. It's just probably one of my all-time non-fictional ocean books, and it's called Listening to Whales.
Okay.
By Alexandra Morton. She's from BC. I don't know if she was born and bred in Vancouver, I think, but it's a tale of a woman who, just by her fascination with the ocean and whales, started like jimmy rigging her own underwater microphone, like a hydrophone, and recording system. And this was like all in like the early, I think it was even like 70s.
Wow.
And so like none of this tech was out. It was like, surfing before there was wetsuits and people going with their wool socks. It was like somehow this woman figured out how to put a microphone underwater and to listen to whales specifically.
Cool.
So it's super cool. But then to see sort of like the evolution of marine conservation from her lens and like her experiences, and it pretty well brings you up to like almost present day. Of her fighting tooth and nail against salmon aquaculture as a means to save the killer whales. And so it's this beautiful tale of like being sort of like that young and bashful innocence when she first started out, being so excited and inspired by the whales that she took every ounce of her to understand them, and now doing everything she can to save them from the brink of extinction. And we haven't done. Nobody's written a book about the North Atlantic right whales. That's like kind of like similar situation happening over here. But it's something I work on, and I'm whenever I think about that book and what Alexandra Morton's been through, I'm like, oh, that's. Hopefully we can kind of learn from that and apply it here. But it's such a beautiful book, and like I think you'd love it. Her husband was an underwater videographer and filming all these whales.
Oh, I'm already as soon as I can get off the recording, I'm gonna go look it up. I don't think I could have picked a better suggestion to fit in the theme of this episode. So thank you for that.
Oh my gosh. And yeah, you're very welcome. I have a copy if you need it.
Okay, it's good to know. Just before we wrap up, where can people find Oceans Week Halifax and maybe even yourself on social media?
Totally. Thanks for the plug. Oceansweek.ca. So is our website. We have our calendar. We have a bunch of archives from all our previous years. All the resources that you need for Oceans Week 2020 is definitely at oceansweek.ca. And then we're both on Facebook and Instagram as Oceans Week HFX. And you can use the hashtag if you want to sort of profile any of your own participation and how you're following along.
Nice.
Nick, I really hope to see that you're going to be involved in the art contest. So please, please submit something.
Okay.
And personally, I'm Alexandra Rose Vance.ca. I know it's a mouthful, but it's my full name.
Pretty sweet Instagram. Yeah, that you have.
That's my website, and then my Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Salty Rose with 2 Y's is my Instagram, and yeah, I hope to find some of the listeners out there, and then they check out my stuff. I'm stoked to be able to check them all out too. It's the beauty of social media, right? You get to connect with people you would never know even were out there beforehand. So yeah, it would be awesome if any of your folks out there listening were to say hi. I'd be stoked to say hello.
Well, that was a great interview, and I'm definitely going to make sure I give her a follow on Instagram, maybe send her a message, tell her thank you for being on the show. Because, when Nick, you interviewed her, we didn't all get a chance to be on that. So definitely reach out and say thanks.
It's pretty cool also to represent, something locally that's pretty major and be able to showcase it. And also the fact that the episode comes out on World Oceans Day, and then it's the start of the week, so people can listen to it and then go follow all the things that they're doing from the website. So it's perfect timing. We didn't engineer it that way though. Yeah, no, definitely not. I think it must be her just genuine positivity rubbing off on the show there, because man, she was there's something some sort of aura about her, I think, for sure. Yeah. So anyway, speaking of auras, we'll go to it. No, that's not.
What are you going to say?
Let me go to commercial. We'll be back in just a minute with a dive report from Amit on the wreck of the Arctic Trader. Okay, and we're back. Thanks for staying with us. Amit, you went diving recently and dove on the Arctic Trader. That's a pretty unique wreck, both in the location and just the wreck itself there, eh?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to suggest that it was not a first choice dive for me, but I have a dive buddy of mine, Jared, who is pretty passionate about it. Apparently him and Ty have gone onto this wreck so many times, planned camping trips around diving the thing, and they know it inside out and backwards. So it's out in Sheet Harbor, which is quite a ways away. It's a good solid hour and a half drive away from the Torpedo Rays shop. And when you get there, you could easily miss it. I certainly couldn't find it, I think, if I were looking again. But there's a great map, I think, some directions on the Torpedo Rays site that gives you some tidbits on how to find it there. But the wreck sits more or less in 25 feet of water. It had caught fire, I was told, and kind of drifted off the pier. It was cut loose and drifted off the pier. And so it sits more or less, I would say, within 30 to 40 feet of the pier. So if you just jumped off of the wharf and swam in a straight line, you'd likely just bump into it. Now, I guess the reason I was dreading going was the fact that they said the viz can be very bad. We lucked out when I dove it, I guess, yesterday, and the viz was actually pretty good for what it is. Some fresh water that leaches in with the salt water, so you have a bit of the differences in the water there to contend with. Right. And as a tip, it seems that we were lucky because it hadn't rained for a number of days leading up to us being there, so I think that helped with the viz. Yeah. It was a great wreck. It offers an opportunity for beginners to be able to experience what a wreck does look like. It forces you to have to look at your buoyancy control because it's a completely silt bottom. If you were to touch bottom, I think you would end up silting the place out in a matter of seconds. And offer some penetration opportunities as well, so you can travel in through parts of that wreck and practice your line work. What I will say is, because of the level of silt that's there, if you're going to end up trying to do some wreck penetrations, it's definitely in your interest to have taken a wreck course, or at least have significant experience ahead of time in doing that. And overall, it was an absolutely enjoyable dive. So we did 2 dives, about 50 minutes each. Water temperature was about 4 Celsius, and offered a great opportunity. A lot of life sitting on the wreck as well. So if you have the opportunity, check it out, the Arctic Trader. And yeah, preferably do it at a time when it hasn't been raining.
Right.
So how big is this boat?
So I couldn't tell you the exact dimensions, but it's an old fishing trawler. I'm gonna guess like it's in the probably 65 foot range.
Okay.
And
Metal?
It's a metal wreck, and so there are bits of board that you kind of find falling into itself, and there's corridors that you can get through that open up into the engine room. We missed the engine room. I think beginner's error on my part from having not dove the wreck before. And of course, on the spin around to try and figure out where it was, there was so much silt. Like, really, you just followed a line out. You had zero viz. I couldn't even see my partner in front of me. So,
Right.
but yeah, great wreck for training. And I think probably the reason I would put it that way is because it does force those techniques that you want to try to perfect if you're going to dive on wrecks, which are your buoyancy, stability in the water, and overall your ability to be still in the water, and then your line work as well. But it's shallow enough that really you don't need to worry about NDL. You just go and you dive until you run low on air, and if you carry a whole pile of air, well, then you can spend a couple hours on that thing quite comfortably.
Yeah. I've only known a few people, I guess, other than Ty and Jared, because they're we could get Ty and Jared maybe as a team on the show one time, because they're kind of
That would be awesome.
The world's most interesting dive buddies.
Those guys have some great stories.
Yeah, but most of what I hear about people diving the Arctic Trader is them going and being zero visibility. Yeah, your head runs into the wreck. So it's nice to hear that there are some good days. And just like any time diving in Halifax, you want to wait until you've had a little bit or a lack of rain and a lack of strong winds, and you get good viz. So good mix there. And and I just want to follow up with while it's a great place to learn and to be taught, don't ever, for the love of God, enter a wreck without a line if you don't, without training and using a line, because you can, if that silts up and you can't find your way out, that's a problem, right?
Yeah, and I'm going to second that, because I'd add to, of course, you should never be diving alone, but don't go in there by yourself, because it's a terrible, terrible thing. Like, if you were to get turned around inside of that and not have someone to look at, and it was an active fishing trawler, so while there's not a ton of lines hanging off of it, there are lines, so there are a few snags, not many, but there are a few snags that can grab you.
It's been on my list. I was actually up in Sheet Harbor last year. I really should have. We rented a cabin up there. Should have gone diving on it. Didn't even think about it. Yeah, what a slacker. Failure. Although I would have had to, I don't know, fly somebody up to dive with me, because it was just me and the family, and I'm the only one that dives.
You know what? I have a friend of mine who owns an old hunting and fishing cabin up there. So maybe we can plan a group trip, and we'll head up there on some weekend and pull off a couple of dives. I
don't even know why I didn't think of this. Jamie Rigel was literally in his boat in the bay in Sheet Harbor. So I could have dove with him. Man, this is. What am I doing here? It's a total.
Are you a diver? Do you work for a dive shop?
Apparently not. Apparently not. Maybe that was it. It was the end of the season, and I was just on vacation. Nothing
sit
else.
In your basement making podcasts.
Yeah.
Armchair diver.
Armchair diver.
Listen to me, folks. I know what I'm talking about.
New Patty's specialty, armchair diver.
You sit on forums all day long criticizing other divers about their gear and stuff?
Yeah, if anyone can find me on Scubaboard and figure out what my username is there. No.
We can flame you.
No. I maybe have a Scubaboard account. I'm not sure. It's been a while.
I'm pretty sure I still have one kicking around somewhere.
Yeah, it probably wasn't updated since I lived in Las Vegas or something, because it's been a few years.
That was a pretty sweet site. I'm sure it's still around, though.
It definitely is, yeah.
Scubaboard, yeah. I know some folks that are hardcore keyboard mashers on Scubaboard.
I don't even know what Scubaboard is.
Wah, wah, wah.
It's going to be a report for next episode.
Next time we'll
April
talk about it.
April's safety tip will be how to survive Scubaboard.
Okay, this week I'll go home and make a Scubaboard account, and I'll start using it, and I'll check back in with you guys next week.
Okay, perfect. This is going to be awesome. So, speaking
Actually,
of...
while you're there, can you just plug the podcast?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not
just find a few random rooms that seem vaguely related, and I don't know. I don't boards. It's a chat board, right? So It's yeah.
All right.
Well,
I'll see
that's
what kind
awesome.
of damage I can do.
Yeah. Perfect. Speaking of damage, do you have a safety tip for us, April?
Jesus.
Oh, come on. That was priceless. Not the all right. Maybe not the best safety tip toss ever, but how to avoid damage, April.
All right.
Thanks. Thanks for playing along.
Yeah. I love your tosses or your throws. Just they're fantastic. I'll dive on into my safety tip here this week. And, this week I'm going to be talking about wearing the proper equipment and how that is really affects your safety. There's a matter of things like wearing a 3mm wetsuit in winter in Nova Scotia. Not safe, not smart. Maybe that's a bit extreme, but I mean, I've seen people try to go diving in like a 5mm in the winter, which they think is an okay thing to do, but in reality, it's not. You're putting yourself at risk for hypothermia. It's not safe. You also see people with regulators. They're diving with warm water regulators in the winter. If you're going to be doing any diving in the winter, you really, really need something that's environmentally sealed. And I think most of us learn that the hard way.
Yeah.
But when it comes to gear, you get what you pay for, right? And your safety is your top priority. So when you're investing in dive gear, you're investing in your safety.
Yeah. No, that's true. Like, I know I'm guilty at the end of the season of still wanting to wear my 5mm, coincidentally, a little bit longer, and then you hit that thermocline and you're frozen and you're out diving with somebody and you just push through it. But that's not great. I could be, you're going to use more air if you're cold. I could be like focusing on how, cold I am and not focusing on my dive buddy who's having an issue or something like that. So I'm sure I could just come up with 75 reasons why, you should be geared up for the environment that you're in and not just not doing it halfway.
I think the same way your mom told you, take a sweater. It's like the same in diving.
Take a dry suit.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember going out with Dave Pate and Thibaut out in the Arm. It was February a few years ago. It was like, it was one of those days. It was like minus 20 and the water's barely zero. And we meet at the shop in Halifax, and this guy shows up. It's like, yeah, I'm coming diving. And it was a club dive, and we're like, okay, cool. Where's your dry suit? No, it's like I'm renting the gear, and like literally shows up in a 2-piece 7mm, and we're like, this guy's not gonna last. And I don't know, we didn't last 20 minutes, but the guy came and went, and we never saw him again. He did leave in his car, just so
Yeah.
That's always a plus. You want to make sure that that's the case, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, those brutal winter dives, I love making those on occasion. But 20, 30 minutes in your dry suit and you're just like, yep, I'm good to go home. That was a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
I think the biggest part of that is just the bragging rights. Just to be like, I went out on a minus 30 day.
Yeah.
It's
But
all
talking safety, though, right? Like,
Yeah.
having the right suit's important, but also being prepared for changing in and out. That's one thing I find in freediving. Like a lot of, we go in the winter, but every now and then somebody just takes a long time to change in and out of their suit, and that just ruins it. And that can be, I think that's the part you got to be planning for as well, getting in and out.
Well, even I was teaching a dry suit course in January, and it was a really, really cold day, and I ended up getting frostbite on my face. And I got that from the time of just getting out of the water and back to my car and just getting changed. The air was literally so cold and the wind that just the wetness, I don't know what you call it, dampness, water on my face, froze to my skin and gave me frostbite. And I looked like the Joker for like a week. So
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for that. I mean, I've been in that same situation coming out, not teaching courses, but starting to have the post-dive debrief. And, it's minus 20 out in February, and we look down and realize my dry suit's actually freezing, so I got to crack the zipper and undo my laces, or I'm not going to get them off. So that's a legitimate reality in Nova Scotia, right? It's a different breed of diving altogether.
Exactly. It's a different ball game than warm water diving, which people don't always realize. And equally as fun, equally as enjoyable, but you got to be prepared.
Just like home, right, Nick?
What's that?
So it's just like home, right, Nick?
Oh yeah. I mean, minus 20 in the winter and the temperature's 0. That's perfect.
Yeah. But even in the warm water, having the appropriate gear, because
Yes, overheating.
Well, yeah, that could happen. I was thinking more along the lines of like people who try to scuba dive with snorkeling fins and
Yes,
they overexert
exactly.
themselves, and they're it looks like they're running a marathon or something under there and huffing and puffing and all that. And they just, because there's a little bit of current and can't keep up or something like that.
And repetitive dives, right? So,
Yes.
if you're going to do repetitive dives in warm water, you're still, by the time, if you do, say, two daytime dives and you're into your third dive and it's a night dive, I've been in that situation, and even with a 5 mil, I'm pretty cold by the end of that, right? Like I'm shivering coming out of the water, and the water temperature is 28 degrees. So it's really
Yes.
being aware of the changes and how many dives you're doing.
And even like the gear that works, like you were saying, Justin, like the little cute pink snorkeling fins. I have a pair and I dive with them in Mexico, but if I try to dive with those here, like they're just not going to cut it. And diving with like a little pair of flimsy snorkeling fins, like with my dry suit on, like not a good idea.
if you can get your boots in them.
If I can even get them on, like, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's all really important stuff. And I guess it all just leads back to just planning your dive. That's something some divers don't do that are experienced. They don't really just think through things. They have a kit, they grab their kit, they go. But sometimes you just really need to think about what you're using and what you're doing to make sure you're prepared for the environment, because those change day to day, week to week, month to month, and sometimes people's mindset does not change that fast.
Exactly. And I even think, too, just being open to the advice, because I know there's been times where I've been like, listen, that's not going to work. Like, that's not going to be warm enough, or something. People, oh, no, like, I'll be fine. But just, like, take it into account,
Yep.
We know what we're talking about. Like, we're instructors, we're experienced. Like, if I give you a piece of advice, I typically know what I'm talking about. Like, if you tell me your 5 mils okay to dive in January, and I say, listen, it's really not, like, trust me, I know.
Experience can definitely help smooth over those speed bumps.
How are the frogs, Justin? There's your toss. How are the frogs doing?
The frogs are fine. I made that picture you requested of the three of you. That I didn't post it. It feels weird, but maybe I'll post it this week
On the shop screen.
On the shop screen. That way, if anybody wants to come see it, they have to come to Torpedo Rays just to figure out which frog is which. I learned something pretty funny, though, this week about the frogs. I forgot to tell you, April. And that is the frog that I've been calling, or the kids, I guess, because it's the most active one, I've been calling Mr. Winks.
Yes.
For Nick Winkler is the biggest one, and it's the one that like swims all over the tank and free falls around. It's pretty cute. But it turns out, because it's the biggest one, is very likely the only female frog, and the 2 male frogs are the other 2 frogs, Baby Ray and Mr. Fish. So that's the life of a frog is full of confusing times, I guess.
So I guess Mr.
That's the ambulance. That's
Is that your dog? Yeah.
The ambulance is going down Roby Street.
I'm sure there are plenty of listeners who have dogs that howl along with ambulances and fire trucks and stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that was funny.
April, do you have a social media tip for us this week? We already got one earlier in the show from Alex. Do you have a separate one for us?
I do. This week I'm going to do Aqualung. I know I've been doing a few brands lately, but I really like Aqualung. And I have an Aqualung dry suit, which I love. So
yeah,
I'm gonna promote them this week. And their Instagram is just at Aqualung Divers. And yet again, like many other scuba diving brands, they don't just promote, their equipment. A lot of it is photography and brand ambassadors, so they're a good follow.
Is that that's the like worldwide Aqualung, not the Canadian Aqualung or anything like that?
They're a howling good follow.
That's a
They're
good
howling.
howl.
Yeah. It's a
He's
serious-
living in the North End with Roby Street between Roby and Agricola.
Listen to him.
Wally, come on.
I'm just gonna start driving by your house, Nick, and just like fire up the sirens every.
Actually, you know what? I live next to the fire station on West. The fire station doesn't work, and police cars don't work. It's only
It's
ambulances.
only ambulances. Wow.
Here he is.
That's hilarious.
It's that well-tuned ear he's got. Just listening for the. Nope. Yeah, you guys can't see this listening in, but we can all see each other on camera, and Wally's there getting some cuddles, some loving from.
Some lovin's.
He gets really
Nick.
embarrassed when you catch him midway through howling in an ambulance. He just looks at you and stops.
I do the same thing. I understand.
That's
Stage fright.
funny.
Yeah.
Guinness has discovered like a lot of new critters here since we've been here that aren't in Nova Scotia, which he's been. And you know what a big one is, which like we have in Nova Scotia, but since he's only a year old, like he doesn't remember it from last year.
Yeah, and they're better in Ontario.
Yeah, exactly. Houseflies are better in Ontario, but he like loves houseflies. He keeps like eating them, and he just traps them like against the wall and eats them, and it's hilarious. But there's these little black birds. I don't even know what they are, but just like little tiny blackbirds. Loves them. Like will chase them all day to the point where he like just falls over because he's exhausted. It's crazy.
All my dogs do is they're small. They just bark at everybody that walks by outside. So, protecting the house, I think.
Sad.
Yeah.
Has he found those giant Ontario mutant squirrels yet? Like the big.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to care about them, but I find them terrifying. They're like the size of a cat.
Oh, they'll eat your cat. You got to watch
And
those
they're
guys.
like they move slow. Like they don't always move fast. Like sometimes they're just strolling down the street, and I find that really disturbing. Like I don't know, I don't like it.
Do they have a top hat and walking cane? Because that's how I'm picturing them.
Oh, that'd
Have
be
you
great.
seen them, Justin?
No.
They're like they're huge.
These guys are like loan sharks. They're like, hey man, where's my money at? Where's my money at?
They're like full. They're the size of a cat. Like picture a cat with a bigger tail. That's the thing. It's crazy.
Wow. I'll have
I don't
to
like
maybe I'm
Google it.
embarrassed to say that I've lived in Canada for almost a decade, and I've never, like, other than an airport, never really been west of New Brunswick. So maybe one day I'll see the rest of the
Road
country.
trip.
Yeah.
Come visit me.
There you go.
So the
Tobermory.
2021 podcasting road trip, go all the dive shops in Canada from east
All
to
the dive
west.
shops in Canada.
That would be fun.
And we dive along the way too, of course.
Sounds like an excellent idea.
So we started Bell Island.
Yeah.
We end up in BC.
Yeah, I think we should start fundraising now.
Yep.
Start our GoFundMe page.
Gonna have to restart that GoFundMe page after that trip we took to Australia.
Yeah, that was a fantastic trip. I wish you guys brought me.
We should have recorded it or done some sort of
I
follow-up or
know.
talk about it or something. That would have been
It's
really
just
good.
top secret. We can't
Yeah.
talk about it.
We make
Yeah.
so much money doing this podcast, we can't talk about
It's
it.
just-
Yeah.
it's really embarrassing. I'm just too embarrassed to talk about it.
Well, I
That's what it
retired
is.
just as a guest host. So I mean, you guys
Yeah.
brought me on today. I just packed it in.
Yeah,
so.
you do 2 shows, you get a pension.
Oh, fantastic!
You can
dipping.
retire.
Yeah, exactly. Well, before this goes any further off the rails, I will get this show wrapped up for today. That is it for this week. I'd like to thank everybody, especially Amit. Thanks for jumping in there again at the last minute and filling us in on the Arctic Trader and all your every other bit of everything you did for us. April has something to say. It's very important.
I was going to throw this in here somewhere, but I kind of forgot about it until now. But I was excited to have Amit on the show because I refer to him as my scuba dad. Even though my real dad is also, I guess, a scuba dad. But even my real dad knows that Amit is my scuba dad. So it was exciting to have my scuba dad on the show today.
Well, you know what? The gray hairs are real, so I'm happy to serve a purpose, whatever that purpose might be.
That's funny. That's good. Well, thanks, Scuba Dad. Thanks for being here this week. We really appreciate it.
All right, kids. I'll be here anytime you like.
All right.
Same bat chat.
You hear that, Nick Fisher? Watch out! Amit's trying to get in on your spot. So
Coming for it.
No one can break up the two Nicks, man. That is a serious bond, right?
Can't break up Nick and Fish or Winks and Fish. Speaking of Winks and Fish, Nick Winkler, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, and I also want to thank our interview guest Alex for taking the time to out of her busy schedule to do an interview for the show.
Absolutely. And April, thanks again for being here in your busy new life in Ontario aside.
I'll always make time for this.
Excellent. That's what I like to hear. All right. You can follow the show on Instagram and Facebook with @divein.thepodcast. You can email us a message, a voicemail, anything you like. Just send that email to divein.thepodcast@gmail.com. Or you can even send us that voice message directly on our website at www.diveinthepodcast.com. If you do send us a voice message, we'll try our best to play it back on the upcoming episode and answer your question right on the air. You can find me at iDiveOK. April is at April Weickert. Nick is at Nicolas Winkler Photography. Nick Fisher is at Scuba_406. Amit is not on social media, so you can't find him.
Right.
You can find
like a ninja.
Like a ninja.
Like a ninja.
You can find links for everything we mentioned on today's episode on our show notes or on our website, diveinthepodcast.com. We'll see you next Monday when we chat with Marianne Watson. This episode of Dive in the Podcast was brought to you by our sponsor, Torpedo Rays Scuba. Head over to your favorite podcast app to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated, and thanks for listening.